Fulfilling a moment he had waited 40 years for, Walton Goggins' Rick finally confronts hotel co-owner Jim Hollinger in the White Lotus Season 3 Episode 7, which ends very differently from the violent expectations for their encounter. But before we get into it, if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button, drop a like and comment on the video, and if you're able, please sign up for channel memberships for exclusive content, which really helps us out. Anyway, back to Thailand. So, about halfway through the season, Rick revealed to Chelsea that Jim killed his father before he was born and now he seeks some sort of retribution for ruining his life. Considering he brought a gun, it seemed like Rick was planning to kill Jim in Bangkok, but that isn't how their long-awaited meeting ultimately went down. While Frank watches, and I gotta say this right, Siptala movies, Jim and Rick leave to discuss other matters. Rick soon reveals that his mother, Gloria Hatchett, told him Jim killed his father over a land deal. As Rick accuses Jim of ruining his life, Jim's confused reaction suggests he has no idea what Rick is talking about. Eventually, Rick aims his gun at the older businessman, but he ends up simply putting it away, lunging at Jim a few times and pushing over his chair before fleeing with Frank, leaving some big questions unanswered ahead of the finale. Season 3 has been building to Rick doing something stupid while trying to find the husband since he arrived in Thailand, yet the most violent that their confrontation gets in episode 7 is Rick pushing over his chair. Plus, to that end, Rick feels bad and silly about pushing over the old man. However, Rick wanted to at least instill some sort of fear into Jim while feeling like he took action against the man who he believes ruined his life. It just doesn't feel right to significantly harm or kill the man. When Rick reunites with Sam Rockwell's Frank on the boat, he explains that he pictured that moment being so differently in his head. He built up this image of Jim as an intimidating, scary, violent figure, but when he finally came face to face with him, all Rick saw was a frail, seemingly harmless, confused old man. Since Jim was far from the person he had imagined him to be, Rick couldn't bring himself to that darker level of violent vengeance that he'd been preparing himself for. Additionally, Rick had never officially decided on killing Jim when he arrived in Bangkok in the stressful episode 5. He truly wasn't sure what he was going to do when he confronted him, but Rick knew that he would never be able to move on from his father's death until he told the killer how he had ruined his life. Rick wanted some sort of satisfaction from meeting Jim, but he wasn't sure that killing him would do that. After seeing Jim and believing that he didn't pose much of a threat anymore, Rick decided that killing him would just make matters worse. Still, Rick did what he came to do. He confronted Jim, told him how his actions ruined his life, and was able to instill some level of fear into the man during their interaction. It's unclear whether this confrontation will really give Rick the satisfaction he needs to move forward, but at least he knows that killing Jim wouldn't have solved his problems. While Rick finally confronted Jim, he didn't actually get a clear confirmation from Scott Glenn's character that he killed Rick's father. Rick was told this information when his mother was on her deathbed, but it doesn't seem like he had any subsequent proof to corroborate that story. Jim is indeed a wealthy businessman who made land deals in Thailand, but he genuinely appeared to have no idea what Rick was talking about with his father's murder. He did, however, seem to recognize Gloria Hatchett's name. Before Rick revealed that Jim killed his father, there was a popular White Lotus fan theory that Jim actually is Rick's father. Considering the body of Rick's father was never found and Jim appears oblivious to being involved in that murder, it's still possible that Jim could unknowingly be Rick's father. Perhaps Rick's mother was scorned by Jim or became appalled by changes in his behavior, so she deemed that his old good self was dead. There's always the possibility that Jim was involved and cannot remember, or is just pretending to be oblivious to his crimes. Considering Rick never ever mentioned his father's name, only his mother's, Jim may not have had enough information to ensure which 50-year-old crime Rick was talking about. With only one episode remaining, there is still plenty of loose ends for the White Lotus Season 3 finale to tie up. As Rick returns to the resort to reunite with Chelsea, the popular HBO show still needs to clarify whether Jim killed Rick's father or if he'll get revenge on Rick for attacking him. Since Rick is returning to Jim and Sritala's own hotel, they'll have the advantage before he tries to leave the resort for good. If there's another confrontation in store for the finale, it could connect to the White Lotus Season 3's teased shootout.